Hello and welcome back to Better Every Day. Man, I'm glad to be back today. John Mitchell, Darren Root. Darren, it's good to see you. It's a weird time.
Great to see you, John. Today's a mixed bag of weather, internally and externally. So, a lot of snow and ice and rain, and it's just kind of crazy outside.
It really is. And man, I don't know when you're listening to this, but it's February 24th when we're recording, and 2022, and Russia just invaded Ukraine. Where I just got a note yesterday, Darren, that Bloomington, where we live, finally is going to lift the mask mandate sometime next week.
I saw that.
But man,
we've only had the mask mandate for 2 years consistently in Bloomington.
We have, yeah. I mean, so London said yesterday, my daughter's a sophomore in high school, and when I told her that they were lifting the mask mandate, she said, I've never been to high school without a mask.
That's probably true.
Wow, that's profound. She has never been to high school without a mask.
Reese made it all the way through middle school without ever showing his face.
That's right. For a middle schooler, that's fantastic. For a high schooler, you got to flirt. You got to. I mean, how do you do that without a mask?
Right. I wish I had a mask all the way through middle school.
Well, I think it kind of, Darren, it is a perfect opportunity for me to bring up a quote that I heard, and I'd love to just pick at it today, because I think it's something that is the elephant in the room for a lot of us, and we're not mentioning it. Here's the quote I heard: "Sustained stress and extended ambiguity are a cocktail for cultural anxiety and organizational inefficiency." There's a lot to unpack there. But this idea that this sustained stress and extended ambiguity are causing this cloud in not just our lives, but in our companies, and by extension, our economy, our world. And I think I'd like to talk today about trying to pick at those things a minute and kind of systematically figure out how we can address them.
It's probably a bit fortuitous, this topic, John, that I woke up stressed today for some reason. And
just not like you.
It almost never happens to me.
Yeah.
That's not a natural state for me. Anxiety is not a natural state for me. And, to just wake up and sort of feel anxiety for a bunch of reasons, whether it's, what you're hearing on the news, or just, having a flat tire yesterday and trying to get my car fixed, stuff super minor, and then I get up and, I always fix coffee in the morning, John, and I watch CBS Mornings, and they have this guy on there who's been a producer for CBS, and he's actually the story, because he's on there with his doctor recovering. I mean, he had a heart attack, a while back. But he looks back at the photos of himself 10 years ago. At 46, he has a heart attack. So he looks back at photos of himself 10 years ago, and he looks vastly older than he looks at 56.
Wow.
So his comments were all around the lifestyle that he was living at the time. And it evolves around what he was doing at work, which was still a producer at CBS, what he was doing in his eating habits, his exercise habits, his family habits. So all kinds of things that we're going to talk about. But you can just see it in his face, because they showed sort of before and after pictures, if you will.
Yeah.
And just looking back at the person that he was, you could see how unhealthy he looked. And he commented at the time he didn't even realize that he was unhealthy. So it was just interesting, all this stuff sort of. I think we're meant to talk about this today.
I think so too. And I mean, you'll have to excuse me, because where my head is with this immediately. and I know you are too. But when we talk about stress, anxiety, the words you've used here, stress, anxiety, ambiguity, cloudiness, unhealth, to me, you and I have been studying this together for at least 5 years, that these are not conditions of your body or your mind solely. That these begin with the condition of your soul, whatever you want to call that. It begins with this ambiguity, this lack of clarity at the deepest part of who you are. And I'm not talking about a religious experience. I'm talking about an existential experience. Like we begin to realize, even if we're not conscious of it, that existence is finite and temporal, and we have to come to grips with it. And I think what you and I have been doing for the last few years is go, man, if we can come to grips with that, it's amazing how much easier it is to get perspective on the physical health, on the mental health, and I'm not saying I'll look younger necessarily, but I have seen a direct correlation to the condition of my soul and my own personal mental and physical health, for sure.
I know I've commented on this book before, and I know you and I have both read it, and I have some other people reading it right now. It's The Seat of the Soul. We talked about it maybe an episode or two ago, but I think it's chapter 7 in that he talks about, the concept of intentionality for our soul. And in the forward to that book, and I think you can speak to this, John, in the forward to that book, Oprah says it's arguably one of the most profound chapters that changed her life a number of years ago, probably 20 years ago. Maya Angelou says it's one of those chapters, this concept of intentionality of your soul is one of those concepts that profoundly changed her life. Do you recall reading that in the forward of that book, John?
Oh, I do. And what's amazing about that whole concept is I love the whole book, but the most important thing for me was in the forward, and it was that. And it set the stage for the whole thing for me. You know what it did for me? I wrote this, and I wish I'd have called up my notes, but I didn't. But I wrote this when I read that I feel like all of the symptoms of the things that feel out of control in my life are a result of the antithesis of intentionality. That it's not just passivity. It's almost like the more stress, the more just survival mode I get in, the further I get from intent. And the further I get from intent, the deeper I dive into unhealthy things, whether it's, oh my gosh, peanut M&Ms. I don't know what it is about peanut M&Ms, but Risha can tell you the condition of my soul based on how many peanut M&Ms I've had this week, because there's something that happens. There's nothing redeemable about a peanut M&M. I mean, it is terrible for you.
Yeah.
But there is something about me that wants it when I am not intentional. There's something about TikTok, about Netflix binging that ends up, it's the place I end up when I don't choose the intentions of my soul. And that's what I felt when I read that.
Mindlessness.
It is. And why does mindlessness feel so good in the moment?
I think what we're talking about today, John, is just how much we want for people to understand the concept of intentionality, and how that intentionality is more than just a surface level. It is deep within our soul. And when we can connect with that deep within our soul piece and realize the impact of intentionality on that's what becomes life-changing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Oprah was speaking to in the forward of that book.
Yeah, the life-changing part of it is not like the fringe of the conversation. It's not I got into yoga and it changed my life, or those are all things that enable the intention of your soul. But what's life-changing is that it begins, all of the intent that you have in your life begins with this intention of your soul. And so, Darren, I'm just going to turn it on you. you woke up today with stress and anxiety that you don't normally have. What does it look like for you to clear that and get back to the intention of your soul?
You know, as minor as it is, it sucks,
Yeah.
right? I don't normally get up and feel sort of, blue's not the right word for me.
Melancholy.
Just disheveled
Yeah.
a little bit, melancholy maybe, yeah. And one of the nice things is that I can recognize it. It's like, I don't like this at all. This sucks. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this, but it's not like you can just turn the switch off today and say, well, I'm not going to feel that way. I get that.
Yeah.
But I'm asking myself, why? Why am I letting things that are way outside of my control impact the way I feel and think today? Why is that? I'm actually asking that question to myself and to you, John.
Man, I may be the worst person in your life to answer that question. And you know that what was an anomaly for you this morning is my regular routine. Anxiety, depression have been a part of my life since I was in middle school. And I'm learning to deal with it on a regular basis. And one of the ways I deal with it is be real honest about it in front of a big group of people like this. Because being honest about it takes some of the power away from it. It grows in the dark and in the loneliness. But for me, my mom's a counselor, and every now and then she has a phrase. A lot of her things that she says, don't necessarily resonate with me. But one of the phrases that she uses is where I thought you might take this. I asked you that question without warning you, and I thought you might end up here because this is something I've noticed in you. But she says that if you need a change of perspective, change of pace plus change of place often equals change of perspective. And I think about you, Darren, like you got a trip coming up to New York, you got another trip coming up to Boston, you got a trip coming up to Florida that's extended. And if I know you, what you're really good at is you love the change of place. You love a new restaurant. You love a city that's not Bloomington. But at the same time, you have to change your pace. You need both of those things. So it's not like you can just go work the same way you work in Bloomington in Florida and get new perspective. You need both of those things. And you can't do it for an extended period of time, most of us. But to do that it's like and I remember Oprah saying this, and in The Seat of the Soul hearing this, that there is often one decision that you make that starts intent. And maybe that's the best thing you can hear today. For me, it's change of pace and change of place. It doesn't have to be Florida or New York City. For me, it's just get out of my home office, which has been a den of loneliness during the pandemic, and go somewhere else and work at a restaurant or whatever it is, and take a day off. And those things become the seat of your soul. It becomes that beginning of intent that is sort of snowballs.
Yeah, it is being intentional about those things that I think warm your heart and create some passion. I realize right now that at least for me today, feeling out of control, I think is the way I would describe this, John. You know how much I like to be in control, but feeling a sense of being a little,
I don't know what you're talking about.
a little out of control. And it's stupid. It is stupid things. It is the fact that my car has a flat tire. It's at the shop and I don't know when I'm going to be able to get up there and get it and blah, blah, blah. Again, stupid things. But feeling the sense that there's a lack of order, even though I do understand that order is really just a state of mind, or that I'm trying to get this, my den completed and it's a little disheveled. It's just that lack of order for me that creates a little bit of chaos. And so I usually try to keep things in order for the most part, as at least within my own mind. But I think today, John, I would love to talk a little bit about how this intentionality, how we can think about that in all aspects of our life because I was really empathizing with the guy that I saw on CBS Mornings today. And, and, I remember looking back at myself when I was in my 40s, and seeing pictures and saying, wow, you obviously weren't eating right, way too many peanut M&Ms.
And you wore mom jeans too.
I was wearing mom jeans. I was not exercising, and my life was controlled by things that were out of my control, like basketball practices and all that kind of stuff, events, and just realizing, I was closed-minded. There were so many things. I look back at those pictures and say, wow, there was nothing intentional about what that guy was doing.
For me, it's about the small choices. I said change of pace and change of place, but I think about work and my job, which is made up of all these small tasks. If you looked at my to-do list right now, Darren, you just you haven't had a to-do list like this for a while. Yours are bigger things, but they're not as many. I looked this morning. I have 42 things that have to be done by the weekend.
Ouch.
Right, and if I look at that in its entirety, it freaks me out. It gets me to the point where I want to do nothing. But what's interesting is if I get a change of pace and a change of place, I start to see the list differently. Well, that one's easy. Let me check that one off right now. Oh, that's just an email. I'll do that right now. And the next thing I know, I've knocked out 5 or 6 things, and you get this momentum. And to your point about control, what's funny is anytime we feel like we're in control, we're just kind of fabricating that to ourselves because we're not in control. We're hurling through space at whatever miles an hour, and we're not in control. Right. And we can, but we talked about this in our last podcast about stoicism and the concept that you look at the things that are within your control, and you let the things that aren't go. There's nothing I can do about Russia and Ukraine right now. But there are some things I can do about this list. And there's some things that I can say, what is in my control and what isn't. What's interesting to me is I know at this point in my life, I'm finally figuring this out, that I will not be able to figure out, I will not be able to delineate between the things I can control and the things I can't until I get a change of pace in place. That's when I can see the list for what it is and let the things go that aren't mine to check off.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me for sure. This concept of stress, and I guess I'm feeling a little bit of that today. You recognized it as soon as I
didn't take me 30 seconds to see it in you
before we went live. It was that's not good.
Oh, it is good. So, I think it is good.
But
it means our friendship is intact.
Doing this in a sustained way, like a lot of people deal with on a regular basis, it cannot be healthy. Again, that's what sort of hit me squarely about the guy on CBS Mornings today is he was doing it in a sustained way.
That's his lifestyle.
In every aspect of his,
passive lifestyle.
Now he's living with intention. And there's always reasons to be unintentional. But I think one of the biggest ones that I see is just lack of awareness that you're unintentional. And really becoming aware of that. In his particular case, he had a special needs child, which I'm sure presented its home challenges for him. He had, stressful job at work, or stressful days being a producer, and he didn't really realize how much that was impacting him. Again, you boil that and you take those two things, and next thing you know, you're eating peanut M&Ms all day and sitting in your chair just hoping to make it to the next day. I just think it's this idea of sustained stress and not even seeing it in yourself is something that you and I want to make sure we bring to light, because there is something else that's better than that, and it's intentionality.
It really is. And most of our listeners are listening because they're part of a business in some way, and honestly, that's what you and I are most passionate about. That's our job, is to go out and help people get perspective on their companies. But to me, the lack of the leadership gap right now, which I see everywhere I look, Darren, I see this leadership problem in especially small companies, it begins with the individual. It begins with your personal life, with your habits, your personal habits, your boundaries, your ability to change your pace and place on a regular basis, your intent of your individual person. So, we see the great resignation, or what you and I have been calling the great reassessment. I think that's a much better way to say it, what we're dealing with right now in our work. But we see hiring problems. We see this weird gap in the workforce. When I get perspective on all of it, I begin to see if we can impact the leaders of these organizations. If we can impact them to say, you need perspective. You need to get to a point where you realize that leadership begins with perspective. And if you're leading out of the fog without this sense of intentionality in your own personal life, the chances of you bringing any kind of an intent to your business are really slim to none, especially in a small company where you are the main influencer. So get it right personally, and then come to work with this perspective where you can see the rocks that need to be moved, the big ones first, and you don't get caught up in the pebbles that are actually causing the friction.
The concept of the Great Resignation is a negative in my mind. It feels like a negative connotation. The Great Reassessment to me feels like positive.
Like evolution.
Right. It's like, if somebody did not like what they had been doing for a long time, and just pick on servers for a minute in restaurants. So if servers didn't like being servers and they reassess that and they find a better path for them, we're actually living through an incredibly positive time. Why do we want a bunch of people doing things that they didn't enjoy doing? And now they're reassessing that and saying, I'm going to take this opportunity to find the way I want to live my life. I want to reassess this. I find that as a massive positive. I realize it creates inconveniences for people. It may take a little bit longer at a restaurant or whatever the case might be. But I love this concept that we're reassessing. We're not doing things the way they've always been done just because they were done that way before, whether it's the way we are living our lives or the expectations that were put on us. I love this concept that I'm actually going to reassess and find what works for me.
An assessment is an evaluation of the current state of things. And honestly, when I started working, I wasn't told that was a possibility. That wasn't an option. When you start your job, it's not your job to assess how things are. It's your job to do your job and get your money and go home. And the future,
when you don't even realize that there's an option to not do that, right? There's not an option to go.
What we're creating is new options. We're creating a new environment. And yes, that comes with some inconsistencies and some inconveniences. But the thing that I love about this opportunity for business owners is if right now you're struggling to hire, or you're struggling with this great reassessment and how it's affecting your company, maybe it's time for you to reassess. It's time for you to think about how you think about your staff and your employees and your team. Darren, this concept of ambiguity to me, we've talked a lot about stress, which is one of the components of that sentence I read to begin this whole thing. But the extended ambiguity to me is what causes this sense of like, I'm done. I am done with this. If you can't tell me why I'm here and what my role is, and you can't tell me how you feel like I'm doing on a regular basis, and I have to somehow read through passive aggressive leadership or read between the lines to get feedback from you, I am out, because there's too much other ambiguity in my life. Should I wear one mask? Should I wear 3 masks? Do I have to wear a mask at the grocery store? Do I have to wear a mask over here? All that ambiguity, all of this stuff in our outside of our lives right now is causing us to hit a limit with our job. And I think that is an amazing thing. But here's what it means. If you're a leader in your company, if you own your company right now, this is your opportunity to get really clear. Find all of the ambiguity in what it means to work for you and fix it. And when you do, you are going to be top on Indeed. You are going to be the place that people want to come. It's going to be easier than ever for you to find the right staff because people are looking for clarity and they're looking for positive ways to mold their life and their job together. It's an opportunity.
Yeah, I keep thinking there's not fewer people than there were 2 years ago.
No,
in the
there's
world.
more.
So, where did they all go? Right. So people keep asking that. I was at a bank meeting last night and we were having the exact same conversation, just different setting, right? It's where did they all go? And nobody seems to be able to put their finger on that. But I, again, super subjective, but it certainly feels like there's as many people as there were 2 years ago, if not a few more. And they still have to support their lifestyle at some point. The government's not supporting them forever. But they're doing things that they want to do.
I think there's an answer to the question, where did they go? The answer is HubSpot, Uber, Chick-fil-A. That's where they go. Because these are companies that have said, we know where we're going, we know what the role of our team is, and we are going to listen to the workforce. So the answer is not, well, they're somehow hiding behind a rock. They're looking for people who get the fact that stress and ambiguity are a recipe for a terrible way to live your life. And they are not going to accept it anymore. So they're out there. They're just going to the places that understand it.
Well, and there's a ton of people, with technology the way that it is today, there's a lot of people that are doing their own things now. We've had more small business starts. It's like record numbers, and I had a guy last night at our bank meeting. He said, I don't think I've seen a 35-year-old CPA opening a practice. He said, are they all 60 years old? Are they all 65 years old? And I said, no, I know tons of 35-year-old CPAs that have opened their practice. They just didn't build a brick building.
Yep, you
downtown.
won't drive by it.
They're doing it virtually. And you're not right. They're doing it a little different than it was done before. And I think a lot of that's what we're seeing. The concept that, John, I don't want to pivot too much, but something that, again, really struck me this morning was the guy I mentioned before, but his ability to look at an old photo of himself and see how unhealthy he looked. Now, again, had he continued to be unhealthy and that was only a progression, he could have looked at that and said, wow, look how good I looked when I was 46. But now, he's running half marathons and eating right and dealing with stress differently. And now he looks back and he sees, all the stress that he was under. I love this idea. I know we all get up each morning, we brush our teeth and we look in the mirror, but we don't really see what's on the other, in that mirror. We don't really see what's going on. I love the idea of taking a photo of ourselves. Just take a selfie in the mirror or something and look at that and see what you're actually seeing. I mean, what are you seeing? Are you seeing somebody that is being intentional about the job that they have, intentional about the way they're living their life, whether that is diet, exercise, their spirituality, whatever it is, what are you seeing? Because the only way to become intentional about this is to know you got to know where you're starting, at least to know where you want to go.
I think it's profound, Aaron. I would add to it a layer that I think it was Gandhi, although I may embarrass myself by saying it was, but I think it was Gandhi that said, the eye cannot see itself. And I think there is some truth and some real, some comfort in the fact that when you got on the call today for this, I said, oh, you had a bad day. Like there's something about the two of us doing life together. There's something about taking a picture of yourself, assessing where you are, but also having someone close to you say, dude, you got to get some perspective. Dude, you got to get out of town. You need space. You need, because sometimes the eye can't see itself. Sometimes your own stress and ambiguity can cause you to see things that aren't there, or to not see things that are. And so sometimes it's friendships. It's a somebody who will say hard things that will be that extra layer of, selfie in the midst of this. And I think maybe that's a good way to end this conversation today, Darren, that in the midst of all of this ambiguity and stress, that knowing you're not alone, reading the right books, listening to the right YouTube stuff, listening to the right podcast, hint, finding the right way to be a part of the solution and the conversation is what will help you get perspective in the end.
Our whole passion, John, is to just inspire people to be better every day. And, this is probably not the right thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, so I apologize. I saw a picture of Bob Saget, doing his thing right before he died. And I looked at that picture and I'm like, wow, that's not the Bob Saget I saw a picture of a few years ago. He looked unhealthy. And I don't know the whole ins and outs of that whole thing, but you could see that he just wasn't looking healthy. When you take that picture of yourself and you really look at that, I think it's worthwhile to just assess where you believe that you're at as a person right now, to really do an assessment of yourself. And if you can't do it of yourself, get somebody else to help you. But it's a starting point to say, hey, I want to start doing some things differently, whether that's work or your personal life or whatever it is. But I think it's imperative that we do that assessment.
Hey, if you're listening to this today, this is a little bit different kind of Better Every Day episode. This feels like a little more like John and Darren's personal therapy than it does anything else. But you know what? That's part of who we are, what we're doing.
It does feel like
it does.
Like a therapy session.
Man, we're just glad you're there. We're glad you're listening and glad to be a part of the conversation. And look forward to another chance to get better every day. It's not just about getting better businesses. It's about your life.
I think, John, we're just all trying to do life together. And I think in Better Every Day, we're just trying to share some of our experiences, and hopefully, it sparks something in somebody to say, yeah, I feel like that. And I want to move my life forward too.
Hey, thanks for listening today. Hope you get a change of pace and a change of place and a new perspective. And you be intentional about your life and your work today. Look forward to next time. See you, Darren.